Well, an ancient discovery is shedding light on the early church. The Megiddo mosaic dates back nearly 2,000 years, and experts believe it decorated one of the earliest Christian worship sites in Israel. For 1,500 years, the mud of the Galilee held on to a secret that wasn't supposed to exist. Historians thought every word Jesus spoke to his disciples was already written in ink locked inside the Bible forever. But they were wrong. On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, a team of archaeologists just pulled back layers of wet earth to reveal a message that has been hidden since the Byzantine Empire. It is a mosaic floor, sealed and silent, preserving a direct command from Jesus to Peter that no gospel writer ever recorded. And the words don't just change history, they might rewrite the entire foundation of the Christian faith beneath the slime. Local legends are stubborn things. For generations, fishermen in the area told stories about carved stones that would peek out of the water during droughts. They whispered about a great house buried in the mud. So a new team of archaeologists decided to take the risk. They weren't looking for gold or jewels. They were looking for a town that the Bible mentions more than almost any other, yet one that had completely vanished from the face of the earth. The dig started in the brutal heat of summer. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decaying plants. It wasn't glamorous, it was a slog. The team had to use pumps to keep the lake water from flooding their trenches. Every time they dug down a foot, the water tried to reclaim the hole. It was like the land itself was trying to keep a secret. For the first few weeks, it looked like the skeptics were right. They found plenty of mud, some scattered, Roman pottery, and a whole lot of nothing. Morale was getting low, but then a volunteer's tail hit something. That made a different sound. It wasn't the dull thud of packed dirt. It was the sharp clink of metal hitting stone. They cleared the area by hand, scraping away layers of grey silt. Slowly a line appeared, then a corner, then a wall. It wasn't just a pile of rocks. It was a structure with perfect 90-degree angles. As they widened the hole, the sheer size of the thing became obvious. This wasn't a fisherman's hut. It was huge. The walls were thick, built to last forever. As they went deeper, they found the distinct curve of an apse, the semicircular area where the altar sits in a church. But this wasn't just any church. The layout was grand, complex, and incredibly old. And get this, the location was exactly where ancient pilgrims said the house of Peter stood. For years, historians laughed at the idea. They said the pilgrims were just tourists who got lost. They said the real site was miles away on a dry hill. But the mud at El-Araj was telling a different story. As the team washed away, the grime of 15th century's colors began to emerge from the floor. Reds, blues, yellows, a mosaic. The preservation was shocking. The mud, which everyone thought would destroy the ruins, had actually sealed them like a time capsule. It protected the floor from looters, from weather, and from the boots of marching armies. But the real shock wasn't the building. It was what they found tangled in the geometric patterns of the floor. It was a message, a text that seemed to be speaking directly to them from the year 500. The crazy part is this was just the outer layer of the puzzle. As they cleaned the tiles, they realized this church wasn't built on empty ground. It was built on top of something else, something much older. And that bottom layer held the key to a mystery that has frustrated scholars for 2,000 years. The discovery was about to get a whole lot darker. Capital of the Apostles. To understand why this mosaic matters, you have to understand where it was found. This isn't Jerusalem or Nazareth. This is Bethsaida. If you know your Bible, that name should ring a bell. It was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. It was the place where Jesus healed a blind man and fed the 5,000. It was essentially the headquarters of the apostolic mission. But here is the deal. Bethel is famous for one other thing. It is one of the 3 cities that Jesus actually cursed. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus looks at Bethel and says, "Woe to you." He condemned the city because despite all the miracles he performed there, the people didn't change their ways. He predicted that it would be brought down to Hades. And historically, that is kind of what happened. By the 4th century, Bethel was a ghost town. It fell off the maps. Roman historians stopped mentioning it. It was as if the earth opened up and swallowed it whole. For nearly 2,000 years, nobody could agree on where it was. 2 main sites fought for the title. One was a place called Bethel, a rocky mound way up in the hills. It had great ruins, but it was too far from the water to be a fishing village. The other candidate was El-Araj, the swampy spot where our team was digging. The debate was fierce. careers were built on proving one site was the real deal. But the discovery of this church changed the game completely. As the archaeologists dug beneath the Byzantine floor, they hit a layer of demolition. Beneath the church, there were Roman-era houses, and not just any houses. These were the homes of fishermen. They found lead weights for nets, fishing hooks, and coins from the 1st century. This was the smoking gun. This was a fishing village. That was active exactly when Jesus was alive. But there is a twist. The way the church was built tells a story of obsession. The Byzantine builders didn't just plop the church anywhere. They carefully centered the church directly over the remains of one specific house. Why would they do that? In the ancient world, you didn't build a massive basilica over a random fisherman's shack, unless that shack meant something. The architects of the 5th century went to extreme lengths to preserve this specific spot. They built a wall around the original room. They treated the dirt floor of the old house as a holy relic. Everything pointed to one conclusion. The builders believed with absolute certainty that they were building on top of the actual home of Peter. Now, skeptics might say, well, maybe they were just guessing, but ancient memory was better than we give it credit for. People didn't have Google Maps. They had oral tradition. Grandfathers took grandsons to the site and said, that is where the rock of the church lived. The discovery at El-Araj suggests that despite the curse and the disappearance of the city, a small group of believers stayed behind. They kept the location secret. They kept the memory alive. They guarded the site until the empire became Christian and they could build a monument. But the monument wasn't just a memorial. It was a vault, and inside that vault, they locked away a sentence that brings us back to the very moment Jesus spoke to his followers. It's not that simple, though, because what they wrote on the floor wasn't a verse you can find in your Sunday school book. The silence of the stones was about to speak. The Byzantine code. Let's go back to that mosaic. As the conservators cleaned off the centuries of grime, the Greek letters started to pop. The team gathered around cameras, clicking, hearts racing. They called in an expert in ancient Greek to translate it on the spot. The inscription begins with a dedication to a bishop, which is standard stuff, but then it drops the hammer. It refers to Peter. But it doesn't just call him Peter. It calls him the chief and commander of the heavenly apostles. Now that is a loaded title. In the world of theology, words matter. The specific Greek words used here are powerful. They suggest a hierarchy. They suggest that as early as the 5th century, right here in the boondocks of Galilee, people viewed Peter not just as a disciple, but as the supreme leader. This plays right into the biggest argument in Christian history, the authority of the Pope. The Catholic Church bases its authority on the idea that Peter was the first pope, the rock on which the church was built. Protestant traditions often argue that Peter was just a leader among equals. But here, buried in the mud of Peter's own hometown, is a text that supports the supreme commander theory. It shows that the local Christians, the people who lived where Peter lived, saw him as the boss. And get this, the inscription also mentions him as the key bearer. This refers to the famous verse where Jesus gives Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. But the mosaic doesn't stop at the standard verse. This is where things get wild. The team noticed that the inscription wasn't just a block of text. It was surrounded by a medallion, a circular border. And inside that border there were fainter letters, smaller, harder to read. They looked like they had been worn down by thousands of feet walking over them. Or perhaps they were carved lighter on purpose. The naked eye could barely see them. So, the team brought in high-tech imaging gear. They used infrared scanners to look through the dirt and the wear. What appeared on the screen made everyone in the tent go quiet. It was a continuation of the sentence, a quote. It was framed as a direct speech from the Lord to his disciple. Most ancient churches have Bible verses on the walls or floors. That's normal. But this text didn't match the standard manuscripts. It was a variation, a riff. Or maybe it was the original version that got edited out later. The atmosphere on the dig site shifted. They weren't just looking at art anymore. They were looking at a transcript of a conversation that happened 2,000 years ago, just a few yards from where they were standing. The words were personal, intimate, and they hinted at a cosmic job description that we have never heard before. The scan revealed the impossible, the preparation of heaven. The infrared images were processed, and the linguists went to work. They pieced together the fragmented letters from the hidden ring of the mosaic. The reconstructed sentence read something like this: "Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens." Let that sink in for a second. guard my house. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells Peter to feed my sheep. In Matthew, he tells him he is the rock. But nowhere in the canonized New Testament does Jesus tell Peter to guard my house. And then the second part, for I go to prepare the heavens. We know the verse where Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you. That is in John 14. But this is different. This suggests a division of labor. Jesus is handling the architecture of the next world, and he is leaving Peter as the security guard of the physical world. Why does this matter? Because it implies that the house isn't just a metaphor for the church. It might refer to the actual physical building they were standing on. Remember, this church was built over a house, Peter's house. What if the tradition here wasn't just Peter lived here? What if the tradition was that Jesus specifically told Peter, stay here, guard this spot. This is the anchor point. This aligns with something scholars call the agria. These are the sayings of Jesus that are found in ancient writings but are not in the Bible. There are dozens of them. Some are weird, some are profound. But finding one carved into the floor of a major pilgrimage site gives it a huge amount of credibility. It suggests that the people of Bethesda remembered something the Gospel writers skipped. The phrase guard my house changes the vibe of Peter's role. It makes him a protector, a sentinel. It's less about administration and more about defense. Defense against what? Well, that is where the speculation starts. But historically, early Christians believed that holy sites were battlegrounds. They believed that demons hated these spots by telling Peter to guard the house. Jesus might have been assigning him a spiritual duty that went far beyond preaching. The discovery also bridges the gap between the man and the myth. It grounds the story. It turns the keys of heaven into something tangible. You need keys to guard a house. Basically, this mosaic suggests that the early church viewed this location, this specific patch of mud in Galilee, as the embassy of heaven on earth. And Peter was the ambassador who was told to hold the fort until the boss came back. But there's another layer to this, a layer that touches on the mystical preparing the heavens. What does that actually mean? It sounds like construction work. It implies that heaven wasn't finished yet. It implies that while Peter was holding the line on earth, Christ was actively building the next stage of reality. It's a dynamic, active view of the afterlife that we don't often hear about in Sunday sermons. The team knew they had something explosive. They had a sentence that bridged the gap between earth and sky, between history and theology. But there is always a wilder theory. The final piece of the puzzle isn't on the ground. It is in the stars. The final secret. If we take this inscription literally, guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens, we are forced to confront a terrifyingly specific possibility. We have to ask, why here? Why this specific coordinate on the planet? Why did the preparation of the heavens require a physical location on Earth to be guarded? There is a theory whispered among fringe researchers and theologians who look past the standard curriculum that certain spots on Earth act as anchors, as above, so below. It's an ancient Hermetic idea that the physical world is a mirror of the spiritual world, but it might be more literal than we ever dared to imagine. It suggests that the geography of Earth isn't just dirt and water, it's a circuit board. And some points on that board are connection nodes. If Jesus told Peter to guard the house while he went away to fix up the heavens, could it be that Bethesda was seen as a connection point, a portal, a literal bridge between densities? Think about the data we have. This isn't just some random fishing village. This is the epicenter of the impossible. This is where the blind saw. This is where the hungry were fed from nothing. A direct violation of the laws of conservation of mass. This is where Jesus walked on water, defying gravity itself. If you look at this through a sci-fi lens rather than just a religious one, a pattern emerges. The laws of physics were thin here. The veil between the worlds was flimsy. It was a place where the code of reality could be rewritten on the fly. Maybe guarding the house wasn't about watching a building or a congregation. Maybe it was about guarding the breach, keeping the gateway secure. This ties uncomfortably well into the Gnostic texts, the ancient esoteric writings that the early church rejected and burned. Many of them talk about guardians and gatekeepers of the celestial realms, entities charged with watching the thresholds between light and matter. This mosaic found at El-Araj might be a leftover fragment of that more mystical, supernatural version of Christianity. This is the version that eventually got polished over by Rome, sanitized into a safe hierarchy of bishops and popes, while the wild cosmic truth was buried under concrete and dogma. The discovery at El-Araj forces us to look at the apostles in a completely different light. Not just as preachers and robes, but as operators in a cosmic system. Peter wasn't just a fisherman who got a promotion to management. He was the designated survivor. He was the sentinel. He was the one left holding the keys, not just metaphorically to a kingdom, but literally to a portal, while the master architect went to work on the other side. It's a staggering thought. It implies that the ascension wasn't just floating away. It was a transit event, and someone had to lock the door behind it. And here is the kicker. The detail that makes the hair on your arm stand up. The church they found, it wasn't destroyed by an army. It was destroyed by an earthquake in the 8th century. The ground shook, the walls fell, and the mud took over. It's almost as if the earth itself swallowed the secret. For over 1,000 years, Peter's house was lost. The coordinate was unguarded. The seal was broken. Or perhaps it was hidden for its own protection. For 10 centuries' silence, the location was erased from the map. But now we have found it again. The water of the Sea of Galilee receded just enough. The technology of our ground-penetrating radar advanced just enough. It feels like the timing isn't accidental. It feels orchestrated. We are digging up these specific instructions right when the world feels more chaotic than ever. We are uncovering the Guardian's order at a moment in history where the very fabric of our reality feels stretched. Maybe the message wasn't just for Peter in the 1st century. Maybe it was a time capsule for us, a dormant command waiting for the right generation to excavate it. Guard the house. Protect the foundation. Remember the origin. Watch the breach. The archaeologists have packed up their tools for the season. The mosaic is covered back up with sandbags to protect it from the elements, but the words are out now. You can't unread them. The frequency has been broadcast. The discovery at El-Araj has proven that the ground still speaks. It has proven that even after 2,000 years of wars, floods and neglect, the secrets of the Galilean shore are still waiting for someone to listen. We thought we knew the whole story of the early church, but it turns out we were only reading the executive summary. The real details, the technical manual for the interaction between heaven and earth, were buried in the mud waiting for the keys to turn. And now that they have, you have to wonder. If the command was to guard the house while he prepares the heavens, and we are just now finding the house again, is the preparation finally finished? What else is Jesus doing up there while we are down here finally looking at the right spot? So here is the real question. If Jesus gave Peter secret instructions that never made it into the Bible, how many other commands are we missing? Does this change how you see the apostles? Or is it just a beautiful old flaw? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of history, smash that like button and subscribe. We are digging up new secrets every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what we find next. Thanks for watching.